Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. So today I'm going to do the second of 3 videos where I talk about the New York City Comic Con panel that discusses the future of Marvel. Because, like it or not, whether you read Marvel comics or not, Marvel is the biggest comic producer there is right now. And as goes Marvel, so is going to go the rest of the industry. Now, in my first video, which I'll link at the end, and I'll also put a link in the description if you want to go watch it right now. But in my first video, I discussed the fact that Marvel's quote-unquote progressivism isn't going anywhere. Their plans for the future is to use this progressivism very heavily over the next year, 2 years. But there I was discussing something very specific that they were doing at Marvel. Today I want to pull back and look at Marvel as a whole in itself and look at where this company is going. And in the third video, I'm going to discuss how that affects us, the reader, and smaller comic producers, whether you be a small company or someone who is trying to crowdfund. So really, the question that I'm going to try to answer today popped up a lot in the comment section of my last video. A lot of people kept saying this: why doesn't Marvel die already? And this, I think, would be another way of saying, why doesn't Marvel go broke already? You know, it's supposed to be get woke, go broke. We see Marvel, they're not making any spectacular sales at all. They're not making any spectacular shipments in numbers. Why don't they go broke already? And why doesn't it die already? Now, what I'm going to discuss today is exactly why Marvel is not going to go broke, why Marvel is not going anywhere, and why, even though they're going to keep on pushing this progressivism, as I talked about in the last video, they're still not going to go broke, and they're still not going to change. What you see now with Marvel is going to be what you're going to see coming out of Marvel Comics for the next several years at least. Now, maybe this will change in the future, 5 years from now, but as of now, from what I have seen and heard from Marvel executives themselves, most prominently Sana Amanat, who is the second in command at Marvel Comics, I have seen, and you will hopefully see from the quotes that I'm going to give you, that this isn't going to change any time in the near future. So when I say pull back and look at the big picture, we're going to look at the really big picture to begin with. So let's look at Disney itself. Why in the world did Disney buy Marvel? Well, of course, Disney bought Marvel in order to make money. Really, it's just that simple. They wanted the intellectual property at Marvel. Even in this panel itself, one of the panelists talked about the fact that, Disney owns over 800 intellectual properties with Marvel. So that's why Disney bought Marvel, because they want to make money, of course, and the best way to make money is to put in as little effort as possible for the greatest profit possible. And this is what they're able to do with all this intellectual property from Marvel. But of course, Disney isn't stupid. Disney has been making movies and television for a long time now. They know how fickle people can be and how an audience will soon get sick of what you have been presenting them and sold well 5 or 10 years ago. They know that they're going to have to move forward with some kind of new stories. They're going to have to, because this is the way the market goes when you're providing entertainment. So they're making money hand over fist right now with their movies, but they're going to have to introduce some new characters. And although Disney owns, as I said, over 800 intellectual properties from Marvel, people are going to start looking at the characters that they put out there and say, look, these are 3rd, 4th, 5th, 8th tier characters. Why are you sticking these things in? No one wants to see this. So obviously they need to back winners. And the winners from the previous iteration of Marvel are starting to die out now. People are starting to lose a little bit of interest, and they're going to have to start introducing new characters in order to keep their money maker chugging along. So how do they do this? Well, I would say that Marvel Comics is an integral part of how they do this. Because Marvel Comics is how they begin to introduce these new characters, or have in the past begun to introduce these new characters that will eventually come into the movies. So again, let's take a step back. I want to go back to a statement that Sana Amanat made, a year and a half, 2 years ago, stating that Marvel was now a lifestyle brand. Now, what is a lifestyle brand? I went over this in a number of videos, so I'm only going to touch on it very briefly here. Lifestyle branding is a form of marketing. I had said before that really it doesn't change the product that Marvel is going to put out there, but I may have to alter that statement after what I have learned in this latest panel. So what lifestyle branding is supposed to focus on, it is supposed to focus on a type of advertising. You know, if you're a running shoe company, you would set up a booth at some marathon and start handing out free water and just put your logo up top. That would be lifestyle branding. Or if you see these commercials that are little narratives and you don't know what product that they're actually trying to sell, then at the very end you might see a flash of the product logo at the very end after this little narrative. That would be lifestyle branding. Okay, it's a form of advertising. But the important part that I want to focus on today is the fact that a lifestyle branding campaign is what is known as a multi-platform advertising campaign. Now, when I had talked about this in the past, I was thinking that she was discussing more the fact that Marvel Comics was going to be a lifestyle brand. But I think it's more that Marvel itself, Marvel as a whole, is a lifestyle brand. And we have to look at all the different platforms of Marvel and how they feed into the money makers for Marvel. Now, briefly, let's look at this panel itself from this New York City Comic Con that was talking about the future of Marvel. You had Sana Amanat. She's the second in command at Marvel Comics. And what does she talk about in this panel? Well, she's saying, this is the future of Marvel. I'll give you two very short quotes from her. She said, this is where we're going. We started out in comics, and now we have expanded into so many different disciplines. And she also said, what I love about what you are all doing, and she's talking about the panelists, which I'll go over in a second. What I love about what you're all doing is that we are telling stories in different formats. The last couple of years, we've had a lot of success in telling Marvel stories in the young adult format and in the middle grade format. So what is she talking about here? Well, she's talking about the different platforms within which Marvel can tell their stories. Now let's look at the panel itself. You have Sana Amanat. She is an executive with Marvel Comics. You have her sidekick, Judy Stevens. She is the one who deals with a lot of Marvel's web content and a lot of things about cosplay for Marvel. You have Lauren Shipman, who right now is taking some well-known Marvel stories and transforming them into podcasts, that is to say, radio play-like stories to be put out in podcasts. You have Mackenzie Lee, and she is currently writing YA novel fiction for Marvel. You have Vita Ayala, and she is a comic book writer. You have Beth Bryson. She is the director of one of Disney's theme parks that focuses on Marvel characters. You have Marcia Griffin, who is the vice president of animation and oversees all the family animated content that originates from Marvel. And you have Sandra Sad, who is an actress who is going to be playing Kamala Khan in the new Avengers movies. Now you see, you have all of these different kinds of people from these different platforms that sell Marvel stories. So the point is that Marvel makes its money with the movies, and all of these other platforms are simply going to direct everyone up towards the movies. They might hopefully make some money in themselves, or they might direct these people to other kinds of platforms which are going to make money for Marvel, but ultimately they're all directing people upwards to the big money makers. That's exactly what they're trying to do with these multiple platforms, because this is part of your multi-platform advertising campaign that is lifestyle branding. Now the question becomes, where on this hierarchy of these platforms does Marvel Comics fall? I would say that Marvel Comics is at the very bottom. It is the base level, because it has all of the history. It is where all of these 800 intellectual properties came from, but at the same time, in the eyes of a multi-billion-dollar corporation like Disney, it is the basest form, the basest medium in which you could tell these stories. So again, the question becomes, why don't they simply get rid of Marvel Comics? Well, it's because Marvel Comics does serve a purpose. And that purpose is not to make money, nor is it to produce good comics, nor is it to get an audience for their comics. Their purpose is to create new characters. So while I think what I'm going to describe is a very loose idea of what is going on, I would say the following is what is going on. You have the people, the higher ups at Marvel, who produce movies and make the actual money. And they need new characters. And they would say to the people lower down and at the bottom, which is Marvel Comics, make us new characters. Make these new characters that will do well within television and the movies and will make us money. So these characters that are being created and that have been created over the last number of years, they're not actually built for the medium of comics themselves. This is partially why they do so poorly within comics, because what these characters are supposed to be built for is to make money within television and within movies and within these bigger mediums where they can actually pull in a substantial dollar number. Now, is this supposition on my part? Well, I would say partly, but I think I have a little bit of evidence to back this up. At last year's Comic-Con, you had Sana Amanat, and she was talking about America Chavez, and the book had just been canceled at Marvel Comics. And somebody came up and asked the question and said, is progressivism killing these comics? And she said, absolutely not. And what did she give as the reason for absolutely not? Well, she said, first of all, that you can't just look at the numbers. Okay? This is exactly what she said. You can't just look at the numbers. We're talking about sales figures. We're talking about how many people bought these comics. You can't just look at those numbers. That's not what it's about. So I said to myself, okay, if that's not what it's about, then what is it about? And so she went on to explain what it is about. She said that this character, America Chavez, was actually considered by her a success. Even though this character failed to generate an audience and failed to make any significant amount of money, she still considered this character a success, as successful as something like Avengers, in her words. And why? Well, the reasons she gave were twofold. Number one, she stated, because they got the character out there. And number two, because they loved this character so much, they were going to take this character and put her into different mediums of Marvel. That is to say, in different platforms of Marvel. And this is exactly what we see with what they're talking about in this panel. One of the characters that they're talking about in this panel is Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, because they are going to take that character and make a full-length animated show about Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. And if you look at the comic itself, which just got canceled, and it got to about issue 50, and the shipping numbers, not the sales numbers, the shipping numbers at the end were lower than 7,000. As I said in my last video, you have Disney, this multi-billion-dollar corporation, this worldwide corporation, and they can't ship more than 7,000 copies of this comic per month, and yet they feel that this is the comic that they need to put into a bigger platform? Why? And this is the same why that I asked when Sana Amanat said they were going to take the failing character of America Chavez and put her into other mediums. Why in the world would they do this? Well, the why in the world they would do this is because these characters were not built for the comics to begin with. This was simply their origin point, and they were made in order to take them and put them into bigger mediums. Which is basically what Sana Amanat said about America Chavez in last year's Comic-Con. So this is what Marvel Comics is presently being used for. If we look at something else, if we look at Marvel Rising, we'll see exactly what is going on here. Because again, at last year's Comic-Con, you had Sana Amanat talking about Marvel Rising coming out as a full-length show, not just as shorts on the internet. And she talked about this show as having the characters, and I quote, that are so popular at Marvel right now. Now let me give you a little list of these characters that she was talking about. This list includes Captain Marvel, Spider-Gwen, Inferno, The Patriot, Lockjaw, America Chavez, Squirrel Girl, Kamala Khan, Ironheart. These are the characters she said were so popular at Marvel right now. Now when I did a video on that, I said, that's just a straight up lie. But we have to look at this doublespeak that she usually engages in. What does she mean by popular? Well again, if we look at what Marvel Comics is doing and how they are trying to take these characters and simply move them into bigger mediums, we sort of understand what's going on. By popular, they don't mean sales numbers. By popular, they don't mean that it has generated an audience within Marvel Comics, nor does it mean that it is selling well. As Sana Amanat said, you can't just look at the numbers. That's not what it's about. What it's about is to get this character out there and then move them into a bigger medium. Now, what is the process by which Marvel Comics does this? Because they have these characters, like Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, or Squirrel Girl. And when they were still producing these comics, and I was doing reviews of them on my 10-second comic review, people were saying, what? They're still making this comic? I haven't seen it anywhere. I can't believe they're still making it, and it's still such a poor quality, and it's only shipping 7,000? Why do they make this comic? Well, I would say they're making these comics as a part of a process. And what is this process? Well, again, the process is not to make money or to generate an audience. The process is to introduce these characters. And this is where progressivism comes in. They want to take these characters and hopefully create them in a way that they will do well within the bigger mediums. But they have to make sure that they have some kind of positive word of mouth with these characters in order to move them into the bigger mediums to begin with. But they can't generate that by sales, nor do they wish to, because that would take too much resources. That would take too much money. So how do they do it? Well, they do it, as I said in another one of my videos, by making the currency of Marvel Comics not money nor popularity, but awards. And that's why they make all of these characters progressive. Now, I would say that the people who are producing Marvel Comics, they are thinking to themselves that they're making them progressive because that's the right thing to do. But I would say the people who are higher up at Marvel, they don't give a flying fig if they're progressive or not. They simply want them to be progressive so that they can generate these awards and this word of mouth. Because if you have comics, awful comics like Iceman, getting multiple write-ups in a paper like the New York Times, that is the equivalent of an award. And all of these comics have generated smaller awards themselves. Because if there's one thing progressives are good at, it's patting each other on the back. And I would say the reason for this is because they need to support each other because their ideology doesn't actually mesh with reality. And in order for them to keep themselves going, they need to have this mutual dependence on each other so that they can make themselves believe that they're actually doing what is right when reality is trying to smack them down at every turn. And they do this by supporting each other. And they have developed over the last number of years this intricate support system whereby they give good word of mouth to each other and they give awards to each other. And all of these comics have received good word of mouth from these giant institutions like the New York Times, or have gotten these awards from these smaller institutions. And this is exactly what these characters in these Marvel comics are set to do. They are progressive so that they can generate good word of mouth, they can generate these awards, and Marvel will continue to put out this garbage comic for 50 issues, and they know it's a garbage comic, and they don't care about the sales, and they don't care who reads it. They just want to introduce the character for 50 issues, allow it to generate some word of mouth, to generate all of these awards, and then once it gets to a certain critical point, they'll say, okay, we can now use all of this word of mouth, we can now use all of these awards and say, listen, we're going to take this character and put it into a slightly bigger medium. People know who the character is, and we can use all of these awards to use, again, as advertising for look how popular this character is. So the point is to take these new characters created within Marvel Comics, to use these awards, to move them up into a slightly bigger medium, that is to say mediums like these YA novels, middle grade novels, or the radio plays, or the cosplay, or the animation. And once they get them into these medium-sized Marvel platforms, that's when you introduce these characters to the culture at large. And after they have been introduced into the culture at large, then they get introduced into the movies, and that's where they make their money. And this is what we see exactly with Kamala Khan, because this process that I have described and that Sana Amanat is describing within this panel itself is exactly what they have done to Kamala Khan. You had this character, this awful character, that really failed to generate much of an audience at all. The book just keeps on getting cancelled. They have to reboot it to try to get the sales back up. But usually after about 15 or 20 issues, it dips down to the level of 1,200 comics shipped per month for this character. No one really is reading it. It is not generating money. And yet, last year, they took this character and made her the center of Marvel Rising, which started out as their animated shorts on the internet and then went into an animated series. And then they started moving the character into the schools, into these plays that they were trying to sell to schools, and into these middle grade and YA novels. And after they had accomplished that, now they're going to bring her into the movies, which are the next Avengers movies, where you will now see Kamala Khan on the big screen. And one other thing. You might be asking yourself, why would they go through this entire process? Well, they need to go through this entire process and use this progressivism to go through this process because they have a limited amount of time to actually bring these new characters into these moneymaker movies. They don't have the 20, 30, 40 years to generate good stories like these old characters had in order to get them into these great stories into the movies. No, they got to get them in there within the next 10 years so that they can keep their money train chugging along. And the best way that Disney knows how to do this is to play upon emotion, is to play upon an emotion like nostalgia. And this is one of the reasons why they target progressivism or these leftist kind of movements in order to mimic what they need for their audience in order to connect with their shallow characters. Because progressivism has a similar structure to nostalgia. In order for the progressives to sell their ideology, you need to turn off your rational mind and just use feelings to navigate whatever is in front of you. And this is exactly what nostalgia does. So Disney will use this mechanism to mimic nostalgia in order to get into the minds of these people, and so they will not need great stories. and they will not need that history to bring about these great stories, and that is what they will use to continue to make money with this product of superhero movies. Now, whether or not those movies make money, I'm not going to speculate on, but I can see and tell you right now that what that means for Marvel Comics is that Marvel Comics is not going to go away, it is not going to change, and it is not going to get any better. So the entire point of Marvel, as part of this multi-platform advertising campaign that is lifestyle branding, the entire reason for the existence of Marvel Comics is not to create good stories. Far from it. I would say if they start to create good stories, Disney will probably say to them, stop that. You should move that person up. We don't want them putting these good stories into such a base medium. Put it into one of these higher platforms where we can make a lot of money. And one of the fundamental reasons why all of these new characters fail is not just because they're specifically built to be these progressive characters to generate this word of mouth, but because in their inception, they are built to exist in a different medium than comics. And I did another video recently where I looked at one of Stan Lee's old interviews where he talked about how to make a good comic. And he said, write a comic that you would be excited to read. Well, I'm here to tell you that if this model holds with Marvel Comics, and I do believe that this is the model that Marvel Comics is working under right now, if this holds, you will never see those kinds of comics from Marvel again. You will never see true heroes. You will only see a bizarre, warped character because they are specifically built to be a product to make money in a different medium. So, if I've given you anything new to think about, hit like, hit the shield in the lower right-hand corner of your screen to subscribe, and leave me a comment. Tell me what you think about all this. All right, I'll see you later. Bye.